I got two surprises in this video. One of them is good, one of them is not so good. The first one, I got a haircut. So that's the good surprise, and y'all seem to like the Mario hat lately, so why not? But two, the bad surprise comes to the phone. So there have been two more updates that this phone has received since the last time that I made a video about it. This is a new one. So what I did is I returned the original one, exchanged it, I got another one. Thankfully I was able to get it in purple, so now I have my favorite colored. That's one thing I love about the Sony Xperia 1 series phones is I had a purple Series 3 and I have a purple Series 4. So I exchanged it to see if one, maybe just by a stretch of imagination, maybe my unit was not that great, because I've had other people tell me that you're crazy, bro, my phone's not overheating. Well, that was part one of the experiment, and part two, there's been two small software patches, which of course Sony doesn't tell you what it actually fixes. So I had people telling me, yo bro, it's fixed all the overheating problems. Sadly, I'm here to report it has not. So I went out and tested it, and I thought, I had just like a glimmer of hope for just a little bit that it might be slightly better, and that's not the case. So in typical thorough me fashion, I used the phone for at least a week before I tested it out, because you know that they're more prone to overheating and things like that in the first week till it learns your behavior, the adaptive battery kicks in, all that stuff. So I couldn't comment on it immediately. So I had to test it out. I gave it a week, and then I was kind of noticing, hey, it's not really warming up as much as I'm using it. And then I realized that even though I switched all my settings over from the Mark III to the Mark IV, or actually no, from the Mark IV to the Mark IV, before I sent it back, it didn't turn my 120 hertz on. So I was using it with the 60 hertz screen. So I will tell you, in my travels and the usage of this phone, if you use it on 60 hertz, at least when you're using the phone, it is way less prone to heating up, because it was a night and day difference. Once I switched over to 120 hertz, I've noticed as I've used it for probably about 20-30 minutes of extended usage time, the phone does start to get warm when you're using the 120 hertz, and that's just not good. There's no other phone that I've used, period, point blank, end of story, that heats up when it's just using 120 hertz when you're browsing Twitter and surfing like Yahoo. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. Not playing games, not running apps, just using Twitter and using my Chrome browser, the phone gets warm. And whatever. So this phone, I've noted extensively, has the heating problem. So part two of the test was the camera. So I went outside today, and I actually tested it the other night. It was about probably 88 degrees, 87 degrees outside. It was evening time, so I wasn't in the sun. It was late. Of course, it was really humid, and I was able to record for over 10 minutes. So that was assuring to me. It was reassuring. So that's okay. And before, I'd recorded in a 10-minute environment inside my office where it's 68 degrees. So low temperature, not out in the sunshine. The sun really pushes it over the edge. So I recorded 1080p, not even 1080p 60 frames per second. And that's where I conducted that test. The second test, again, 1080p 30 frames per second. I stood under a shade tree out in my front yard. Stood under the shade the whole time. It made it to 5 minutes on 1080p. Now, as soon as I took it out in the sun, after that 5 minutes, it did not take long to overheat at all. So what I did is I put it in front of the air conditioner vent in my car for about 20 minutes, got the phone freezing cold. Like, I cooled this sucker off. It was like a brick of ice. And I turned it on 4K, 30 frames per second. I went back out. I stood outside. So I stood outside in the front yard. I didn't hold it up in the sun. I just held it down in my hand. Yes, it got some sun exposure. Still overheats in 3 minutes. So I have not really seen that there's been any change. And this is my second Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. There have been two substantial updates that were supposedly, people told me were supposed to have fixed it and made the heating issues better. Again, if you're not out in the sun, if it's not over 90 degrees outside, and if you're in the shade, and that's not even 4K though, that's 1080p. It'll record 1080p for 5 minutes under a shade tree when it's 90 degrees outside. So it's still not very reassuring. If you're inside, I do have one other piece of good news. I did an entire just over an hour live stream using the selfie camera. The selfie camera doesn't seem to be nearly as prone to the heat issues as the primary camera, but the hardware is not anywhere on the same level. So there is that. Also, maybe if you put it on 60 hertz and turn the brightness down a little bit, maybe it might give you an extra 30 seconds, but I don't even think that helps out much, because I tested it before with my last one between 60 hertz and 120 hertz, and there was no difference. So the biggest thing is, if you're shooting 4K, it puts a lot more strain on the processor than it does with 1080p. I'm glad this thing doesn't shoot in 8K, because oh boy, it would probably overheat pretty quick. So my thoughts on this. I don't think it's really going to get better. Unless they do something really substantial to it, this is not going to improve, because this is largely probably a software issue, because it's, I don't know. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes or under here, other than there's only so much you can do. There's no thermal mitigation in here whatsoever. No heat piping, no heat tube, none of that stuff. It's basically just all jam-packed in this skinny little chassis. So that's where you get an advantage with like the S22 Ultra. I take the S22 Ultra out, I stand outside, hold the phone up in the sun and record. I recorded for over 10 minutes, 4K, 60 frames per second, never skipped a beat, never stuttered, never overheated. I gave up. So this is by far the worst that I've ever used when it comes to a phone, when it comes to overheating issues. And again, it's the stubbornness of Sony. They refuse to do anything to try and keep this phone cool. And on top of that, they make it so thin, everything's so compact, and there's no passive heat management either. So it's basically like putting it inside of a hot box and just putting it out in the sun and letting it cook. That's really what it's doing. So if you don't go out in the sun, if you're in an air-conditioned environment, if you're using the selfie camera, I mean, here's the other thing though. It does it when you use the camera. If you just have the viewfinder on and you're using the camera for a couple of minutes out in the sun, it'll do the same thing. It's not just recording video. This thing just can't take the heat. If you're outside in the sun, this phone, it sucks. It really does. And that's the best thing that I can say about it. So I had hoped that there would be some sort of a change whenever we got the last couple of updates, especially with people talking about it. Again, if you're in a cooler climate, if you're under a shade tree, if it's under 85 degrees, maybe you might can record for 5 or 10 minutes at 4K, maybe if you're lucky. But this is not an outside phone. I mean, if you go record at night, you're good to go. But during the daytime, not so much. So, very frustrating. I still have the phone. I absolutely love the phone. I wouldn't have exchanged it. I'm going to keep this one. I'm not sending it back. I use it as my daily driver. But I have no delusions of grandeur that I'm going to go out and record anything. Like, my kids are going to start football again next month. I won't be able to take this phone to go record with it. I'll have to use my S22 Ultra or use my iPhone to go out and record. So it's really sad to be able to say that, because they made so many improvements with this phone. The camera's improved. I do think that the camera app has improved a little bit. In basic mode, taking photos, it does seem to be better. I love that it has a better selfie camera, 5,000 milliamp battery. There's a lot that they did right with this, but managing the heat with this processor is not anything they did right. I don't know what they're doing to try and counteract it. I don't know what they're trying to do to fix it. Maybe there's a sliver of hope for when the US model gets here. And here's the other thing. This is not even using 5G. If I were using 5G and 4K recording at the same time, it would probably overheat even faster. So I have no hope for once 5G actually gets enabled when you get the US model, if you're using this on 5G elsewhere. But maybe, just maybe, when they officially launch it, because I still have people in the comments going, it's not even out yet, bro. It's not coming out until October or September or whatever. September. This phone launched in Asia and India back in, June? May? And then it went ahead and it launched in the middle of June in Europe. So the only place it really has left to launch is the US. It's been launched on 2/3 of the globe where it's actually sold and marketed. So I don't really buy into that argument. This phone, I'm sorry, if you actually want to use it for recording video, you're out of luck. Like, I wouldn't even recommend taking this outside and trying to record the 120 frames per second, because it'll probably top out in 2 minutes quick if you're out in the sunshine. If you're, again, you got an umbrella, you got somebody holding it there, spritzing some water on it, using a little old Egyptian fan, trying to cool it off, maybe you'll have some luck. But I'm sorry, this is the last and final report I think I'm going to do on this. I gave it one more shot. I exchanged it for another phone. I tried it under different conditions. Got 2 updates in it. It's just not any better. So that's it. Hopefully you've had better luck than I have, but I'm not expecting greatness from this. And if you want to use it for anything, especially during the summertime, you're out of luck. Now, once it gets to the fall and the winter and the spring, it'll be golden. You'll be able to record for 10, 15, 20 minutes, probably to your heart's content. But if it's over, probably 88, 90 degrees outside, which is a lot of the world, nothing spectacular to report there, then sorry about your luck. So that's all I've got. If you have any questions or comments, please go down in the comments section. I will get back with you. If you enjoyed the video, if you found this helpful, please hit the like and the subscribe button and the little notification bell if you want updates when new videos come out. And as always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys next time.